The year was 1872, and the plains had grown cruel. A man could ride 100 miles and find nothing but dust, dead grass, and the bones of cattle bleaching under the sun. Along one such road came a cowboy who had once been proud, though now pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. His boots were cracked, his hat drooped with sweat and age, and the stubble on his chin looked like it had been left to grow not from choice, but surrender. He led a horse by the reins, his last horse, and even that beast's ribs showed through its hide like the slats of a broken fence. The cowboy's name was Will Harper, though few men in the territory remembered any more. They called him Poor Will when they spoke at all. Once, he had cattle on the Arkansas, a wife who made biscuits and laughed easily, and a boy who chased grasshoppers through the yard. Drought came first, then fever, then raiders who took what little stock had survived. Now only this horse remained, and it was worth near as little as he was. He trudged into a town so small, it looked like it might blow away in the next dust storm. The main street was nothing but 2 saloons, a trading post, and a handful of crooked shacks. The air smelled of wood smoke and whiskey. Children stopped playing marbles to watch him pass, their eyes wide, for he looked like a ghost dragging a corpse. A woman muttered from her porch, "That one's about done for." Will ignored them. Hunger had hollowed his gut, but shame cut deeper. He had come for one reason, to sell the only thing he had left. Inside the trading post, the air was thick with pipe smoke. Men leaned on counters stacked with jars of nails, bolts of cloth, barrels of flour. They turned to look at him. The silence heavy, the way men regard someone already half in the grave. He cleared his throat, voice rasping. "Got a horse to sell." One man barked a laugh. "That bag of bones you drag out there? You'll be lucky if someone gives you a nickel for it hide." Another said, "Hell, I seen better meat left for coyotes." Will stood his ground, though his face flushed hot. She's still sound enough to ride. But the truth hung in the air. No one wanted the horse. Not for money, not for pity. They smirked at him, delighted in watching a man's pride snap like dry twigs. Will almost turned to walk out when the door opened. Every head turned. An Apache elder stepped inside, tall and lean, his face carved with lines that told of many winters. He wore a worn deerskin shirt, the fringe dark with dust, and his hair was streaked with gray. The room tense at once. Some men put their hands near their pistols, for old hate never lay far beneath the skin in such places. But the elder moved slow, with a calm that made the air itself shift. His eyes were dark, steady, and when they landed on Will, it was as though he were seeing something no one else could. The elder walked the counter. He did not look at the settlers. He looked only at the cowboy. Then, in a voice low but firm, he said, $2. For a moment no one spoke. Then laughter broke out, harsh and jeering. $2? That nag ain't worth 2 cents. That redskin's crazy in the cowboy. Will's heart hammered. He should have felt insult or suspicion, but instead he felt something else. Respect. The elder was not mocking. His words carried no cruelty, only weight. $2 was nothing, and yet, to Will, it was more than any of these others had offered. His throat tightened. He nodded once. Done. Coins clinked on the counter. The elder picked up the reins, leading the worn-out horse outside. The mockery swelled behind Will like a wave, but he stood rooted, staring after the old man, knowing he had just surrendered the last piece of himself. Night settled heavy over the plains. The town quieted, its lamps glowing dull in the windows, the streets silent but for the creak of a hanging sign. Will sat against a hitching post on the edge of town, turning the 2 silver coins over in his palm. They felt small, cold, and meaningless. A man could not eat for long on such a sum, nor drink enough whiskey to forget what he had lost. He stared at the stars, sharp and endless above, and for first time in weeks, he wondered if he might vanish beneath them without anyone noticing. The horse was gone. His last tether to usefulness, to worth, was gone, and yet, as he thought of the Apache elder's eyes, he felt something strange. The man had looked at him not as a beggar, not as a broken thing, but as a man making a choice. Will lay back in the dust. The coyotes yipped far off, and the wind moaned to the dry grass. He pulled his coat tighter, though the cold still sank into his bones. He dreamt uneasy dreams of riders on the horizon, their silhouettes sharp against the dawn, though whether they came for him or against him, he could not tell. He woke with a start, heart pounding. The image of the Apache elder standing at the edge of his mind like a shadow. Will sat up. The horizon glowed faintly with moonlight, and for just a moment he thought he saw movement, shapes on horseback far in the distance, slipping like ghosts between the ridges. He rubbed his eyes, but when he looked again, they were gone. The next morning, the town was alive with whispers. Men gathered outside the saloon, muttering low. A rider had come in at dawn, saying Apaches were seen nearby. Maybe dozens of them, maybe more. The old fears stirred at once. Some muttered about raids, others about revenge, and one name kept surfacing. Will Harper. Fool went and sold his horse to one of them. A man said, spitting, might as well hand it over a map to the town. He's a traitor, that's what he is. Will heard their words as he stepped into the street, his hat pulled low. He kept walking, though their eyes followed him like knives. He had no defense to give them. He could barely defend himself from hunger, let alone from their suspicion. Yet still, he could not shake the feeling that what had passed in the trading post meant something more than they understood. Later that evening, as the sun dipped blood-red behind the ridges, Will stood on the outskirts, staring out at the horizon. The land looked endless, cruel, and yet full of secrets. He thought again of the Apache elder, leading his horse away. The man had turned, just once, to look back, not with scorn, not with pity, but with a gaze steady as the mountains. What did you see in me? Will whispered into the wind. But no answer came, only the rustle of dry grass and the promise of tomorrow he could not yet see. Behind him, the town lamps flickered to life. Ahead of him, in the shadows of the plains, something waited. He did not know what, but he felt it pressing closer with every passing hour. The night deepened. Far off, beyond the ridges, the faint drum of hooves echoed once more. Morning light broke over the crooked roofs of the town, pale and harsh, laying every shadow bare. Will Harper walked through the dusty street with his collar turned up, hat brim low, but he could feel the weight of eyes on him. The whispers from the night before had taken root, spreading like fire in dry grass. Men gathered outside the saloon, talking low and sharp, their glances full of suspicion. That fool sold his horse to an Apache, one man muttered, spitting into the dust. Mark my words, it ain't just a horse, another said. That old redskin setting us up. This town be ashes before the week is out. Will kept moving, his boots crunching against the street. He didn't bother to argue. Words wouldn't change their minds. The coins in his pocket clinked with every step. 2 small pieces of silver that felt heavier than lead. He had traded his last scrap of dignity for them. And now they made him a target of suspicion, a man set apart from both sides. He passed a general store where a pair of women hushed their gossip as he neared. A child clutched his mother's skirts, staring wide-eyed at him as if he were something dangerous. Will ignored them all, but inside, something twisted. He had known hunger, thirst, and loss, but this cold rejection was something deeper. By midday, he could stand it no longer. He saddled nothing, for he had no horse now. He took only a water skin and his worn rifle, and he walked out of town. Better the silence of the desert than the jeers of men. The land outside stretched wide and merciless. The grass lay brittle, the wind hot, and the sky above unbroken blue. Will trudged onward, his boots raising puffs of dust. By nightfall, the town was a smudge behind him, the silence vast. He camped beneath a stand of mesquite, starting a small fire with the last of his matches. The flames licked at the darkness, but they gave little warmth. Hunger gnawed at him. He had nothing to eat but the memory of better times. He thought of his wife, gone these many years, of his son, buried before he'd grown tall enough to see over the fence rails. Those ghosts walked with him now, heavier than any pack. A hiss broke the stillness. Will turned sharply. A rattlesnake lay coiled near the fire, its body thick, eyes gleaming like embers in the glow. He acted without thought. Knife flashed in his hand, quick and sharp. The blade struck true, and the serpent writhed, then lay still. Breathless, Will stared down at it. Hunger tightened his belly again, Stronger now. He cut the snake open, roasted it over the meager fire, and ate in silence. The meat was bitter, stringy, but it kept him alive. All the while, he felt eyes on him. Shadows shifted in the dark beyond the firelight. Once or twice, he thought he heard the faint thump of hooves on the hard earth, but when he peered into blackness, there was nothing, only the endless night, waiting. The next day dawned dry and merciless. The sun climbed fast, scorching the land. Will walked on, sweat running down his back, lips cracked from thirst. His rifle weighed heavy on his shoulder, though he hadn't fired in weeks. He moved through the arroyos and rocky gullies, every step slow and deliberate. He told himself he was headed nowhere, because nowhere was all he had left. By evening, he found a patch of shade beneath a jut of stone and sat down hard, too tired to think. His canteen was near empty. His mind swam with heat, with voices that weren't there. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he thought he heard his boys' laughter on the wind. When he opened them, he wasn't alone. Across the fireless camp sat the Apache elder, the same man from a trading post. His face was calm, unreadable, carved by years of wind and sun. He carried no weapon that one could see, though that meant little. His presence alone was weapon enough. For a long moment, neither spoke. The elder reached into a pouch and drew out a piece of bread, hard and dark, and a skin of water. He placed them between them in the dust. Will's hand hovered. His pride flared. Was his charity? But his thirst burned hotter than his pride. He drank deep, the water running down his chin, sweet as salvation. He ate the bread in silence, each bite a reminder that life, however bitter, was still as a hold. When he was done, he set the skin down, his eyes narrowing. Why? The elder's gaze held steady. His voice was low, accented but clear. You gave more than you know. Will frowned, not understanding. I sold a horse for $2. That's all. The old man shook his head. You gave without greed. You gave with honor. Few men here understand that. Will felt heat rise in his chest, not from anger but confusion. Honor? There ain't nothing honorable about losing everything. The elder's eyes softened, just a fraction. Tomorrow will bring riders. Be ready. The words fell like stones. Before we could ask more, the man rose and walked into the night. The shadows swallowed him, leaving only silence. Will sat frozen, his hand still resting on the empty skin. Tomorrow will bring riders. The words echoed in his mind, heavy with meaning. He did not know whether to fear them or welcome them. Night fell thick and restless. Will stirred the fire, the flames flickering low. The land stretched black around him, every rustle a threat, every shadow a trick of the mind. He dozed in fits, his rifle close by. Near midnight, hoofbeats broke the quiet. He jerked awake, heart hammering. Figures emerged from the dark. Men from the town, 5 of them, rifles slung across their backs. Their eyes gleamed with suspicion and whiskey. There he is, one spat. The traitor. Will rose slowly, his hand on his rifle. I don't want trouble. You brought it. Another snarled. Selling your horse to a redskin. Bet you told him all about the town, too. Will tightened his grip. I sold a horse. That's all. The men spread, surrounding him, their boots crunching in the dust. One cocked his rifle. Ain't all. You'll pay for what's coming. The night went still. Then came the crack of shot. Dust jumped at Will's feet. Another man raised his gun. Will dove, rolling, firing once. The shot echoed, bright and sharp. The air filled with gun smoke, shouts, the heat of bullets ripping past. He scrambled behind the rocks, returning fire in short, sharp bursts. They pressed him hard, bullets sparking off stone, voices cursing in the dark. His breath came ragged. His shoulders stung where a round had grazed him. He thought it would end there, in the dust, outnumbered and outgunned. Then came the sound. A cry split the night, a long, rising war cry, wild as thunder. Hooves thundered beyond the ridge. The townsmen froze, their faces blanching in the firelight. More cries answered, echoing across the canyon. The men cursed, panic flashing in their eyes. One shouted, Apaches! Their gunfire ceased. They fled, scrambling onto their horses, spurring them hard into the dark. Their shouts faded into the distance, leaving only silence and the beating of Will's heart. He stood slowly, rifle still in his grip, smoke curling in the cool night air. His campfire crackled faintly, casting weak light. He stared into the shadows where the cries had come from, but saw no one. Only the wind stirred, carrying the scent of dust and sage. But the warning echoed still. Tomorrow will bring riders. Will sat back against the rock, blood seeping from his shoulder, his hands shaking. The sky above was black velvet studded with stars, yet it seemed closer now, pressing down. Far off, across the open plain, he heard again the low, steady thunder of hooves. Not 5, not 10, many, and he knew the dawn would bring them to him. Dawn broke like fire over the ridges, painting the sky in blood and gold. Will Harper stood alone on the edge of the plain, rifle hanging heavy in his hand, the ache of the night's fight still burning in his shoulder. His eyes were hollow from lack of sleep, yet they stayed fixed on the horizon. For hours he had heard it, the steady thunder of hooves carried on the wind. Now the sound grew louder, the earth itself trembling beneath it. They came into view as the sun crested the rim of the world. 100 riders, dark against the blaze of morning. Their horses kicked up plumes of dust that glowed in the rising light. They rode in silence, no shouts, no gunfire, only the steady rhythm of hooves. Painted faces caught the sun, feathers whipping in the wind, rifles and lances gleaming. At their head rode the Apache elder, his back straight, his gaze steady, leading not just men but an unbroken tide. Will's breath caught. He should have run, should have hidden, but his legs were rooted. The sight of them stole the will from his body. 100 riders. He had never seen such force move as one, and yet they did not ride him down. They slowed, their formation curling like a great river around a stone, circling him until he stood at the center of a wide ring of horseflesh and steel. The elder dismounted. He held the reins, a horse draped in blankets of beadwork and bright feathers. The horse who had sold for $2. No longer a bag of bones. It stood proud, its mane braided, its hide brushed till it shone. To see it alive, renewed, was like seeing a ghost return from the grave. The elder stepped forward. The riders watched in silence, their eyes unreadable, their faces stern with the weight of ceremony. The air thrummed with tension, thick as a storm about to break. Will licked his lips, his voice hoarse. "Why are you here?" The elder studied him. Then, in a voice that carried every ear in the circle, he said, "This man gave what little he had. He gave with no greed. He gave with honor." The word struck Will like a hammer. He wanted to laugh, to protest. Honor? I sold that horse because I had nothing left. $2 to keep me breathing another day. There's no honor in that. The elder shook his head, eyes deep as canyons. Among us, a man's worth is not measured in gold or cattle. It is in what he keeps when all else is taken. You gave your last possession not for pride, not for trickery, but with the dignity of one who accepts his fate. That is honor. Will felt the words burn through him, cutting deeper than the bullet wound in his shoulder. For years he had carried nothing but shame, a hollowed-out shell of the man he once was. Yet here, before 100 riders, he was seen, not as a failure, but as something more. The elder raised his hand. A rider stepped forward, offering Will a water skin and a pouch of dried meat. Another dismounted, leading a horse, strong and healthy, its hide shining like copper in the sun. The gifts were laid before him with solemn care, as though he were being welcomed into something greater than himself. Will's throat closed. He reached for the water, his hands trembling, then let them fall. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why honor a man already broken?" The elder's gaze never wavered. Because a man who has lost all and still stands, that man is not broken. He is unyielding. The riders murmured low, voices like the wind through pine. The sound carried not menace, but reverence. Will bowed his head, tears stinging his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt seen not as a ruin, but as a man. The moment was cut by the sound of hooves, different, hurried, sharp with fear. From the far side of the plain, a cluster of riders appeared. Settlers from the town, rifles glinting in the light. There were 10 of them, maybe more, spurring hard, dust boiling behind them. They reined in sharp at the edge of the Apache circle, eyes wide at the sight of 100 mounted warriors. The leader, a heavy-set rancher with a bristling mustache, shouted across the distance, "Harper, step away from him. You'll get yourself killed standing there with those devils." Will did not move. The rancher spat. "Figures. You always were a fool. Sold your horse to a savage. Now look at you. They'll cut you down just the same. Best come with us before it's too late." The Apache riders shifted, the ring tightening, their faces hard as stone. Rifles gleamed in the morning light, but no shot was fired. Silence stretched, taut as a drawn bow. Will's heart hammered. He stood between two worlds. The town that had mocked him, turned him out, and now dared call him traitor, and the circle of riders who had given him respect when he thought he deserved none. He raised his voice, cracked though it was. These men came not to fight, but to honor. The rancher barked a laugh. Honor? From Apaches? They'll honor you with a knife in your back. He raised his rifle, aiming across the distance. Last chance, Harper. The elder stepped forward, calm as the dawn itself. He raised his hand, and 100 riders leaned in unison, their rifles ready, their horses stamping the ground. The ranchers blanched, their bravado crumbling against the sheer weight of the force before them. Will's blood pounded. This was a test, the moment when all his years of failure and loss would be weighed. Slowly, he stepped to the elder's side. His voice carried steady now, steadier than he felt. "I stand with them." The words cut the air like a blade. The ranchers shouted in anger, rifles half raised, but their hands trembled. They were outnumbered 10-1. The elder's gaze swept them like steel. The circle of riders tightened further, the ground shuddering with the restless stamping of hooves. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then the ranchers faltered. Their leader cursed, wheeled his horse, and the others followed. Spurring hard, their retreat a cloud of dust vanishing into horizon. The silence that followed was vast. The riders did not cheer, did not taunt. They only sat tall in their saddles, watching the dust fade, their discipline as sharp as any army. Will stood trembling, but not from fear, from release. The weight he had carried for years lifted, not entirely, but enough for him to breathe. He turned to the elder. "I had nothing left," he said softly. "And still you saw something worth honoring." The elder placed a hand on his shoulder, firm, steady. "You have lost much, but you are not alone now." The riders parted, making a space. One by one, they bowed their heads as Will passed through the circle. His old horse, adorned in feathers and beads, snorted softly as if recognizing him. The new horse waited, reins draped over the elder's arm. Will reached out, his hand brushing the animal's mane, warm and alive. He swung into the saddle. The leather creaked, the weight of it familiar yet new. For the first time in years he felt whole, as though he had been lifted back on the road of his life, instead of left to wither in its dust. The riders wheeled as one, 100 strong, their horses pounding the earth. The sound rose like thunder, shaking the sky. Will rode among them, not as a ghost, not as a failure, but as a man reborn. The horizon opened before them, wide and unending, the sun blazing high, and in the voice of the narrator, soft but unyielding, came the words. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe it's this, that a man can lose everything and still find his worth, not in land or coin, but in the honor he carries. A poor cowboy sold his last horse for $2, and by dawn 100 riders came not to take, but to give, to show him that even in the cruelest country, dignity can make a man more than he believes himself to be. A pause, like the breath after a prayer. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it. For in every man's tale, there's a lesson worth carrying down the trail.